Hello and welcome to another Sunday podcast. It's 2025. I nearly said 1925. Stone the crows, 2025. The date today is, I've no idea, the 3rd, so it's Friday, and 0 degrees outside, which of course is 32 degrees Fahrenheit, isn't it? Feels like -3, according to my app thing here. 93% humidity, 1024 millibars on the barometer, and the flag, well, there's frost and ice everywhere, but the flag is trying to make a little bit of an effort. There's a breeze from the west, beautiful clear blue sky, the sun is coming up. It's going to be a very nice, clear, crisp day, which is rather good. I know I sound a little out of breath, but that's the sort of remnants of my cold, which is just about going now. Still a bit of a cough, but it's that time of year, isn't it? I hate it all, coughs and colds and spluttering and blocked up and everything. I don't know what the point of all that is. Anyway, as I say, very frosty out there. We've got 2 bird baths. They are solid blocks of ice. I must pop out there in a minute and take out the blocks of ice and refill with proper fresh water for the birds. I've fed the squirrels. We've got the squirrels coming for the monkey nuts. We've got the pair of jays. They came together yesterday. The 2 jays, they landed together. We've got the bowl of peanuts under the patio roof so it doesn't get wet in the rain, you know. They don't want wet peanuts, do they? And both jays came down and they're each side of the bowl, not just going off with peanuts. One of them, must be the male, one of them, honestly, he swallowed a complete monkey nut, you know, the whole thing with the shell. He swallowed it. Then he swallowed another. He swallowed 3. I really don't know how they do that. The lady one, she just took one and flew off. She's more refined, obviously, than the chap. So then he was trying to swallow a 4th one. He couldn't manage that, so he just went off with one in his mouth. The pigeons do that. They swallow the nuts whole in the shell and everything. I don't know. The squirrels, of course, they chew them there. Some of them they'll take away and bury, and some of the nuts they'll just sit there and eat them and make a mess everywhere. So that's the wildlife. Gary is still hibernating. He's fine. I do sound a bit croaky, don't I? Apologies for that. I'm on the mend. Anyway, we've done it. We've done Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, Boxing Day, New Year's Eve, New Year's Day. The whole thing is over. And the spring is on the way, especially with this sunshine. It's beautiful out there. Blue sky, not a breath of wind now. The flag's stopped altogether. It's probably frozen solid, it can't move. Anyway, let's move on. I've spent a few days up here in my high-tech recording studio, my radio room. I actually communicate with a station down in Ascension Islands, which is rather interesting. No, it's not, you're saying? Not interesting at all. The reason I mention that is that was yesterday. Then last night on the telly, Trish found something from the old days about the Ascension Islands and the radio station there, the BBC World Service radio station, where they transmit to Africa and South America from the island. And I said to her, I was in contact with someone on the island today. And she said, oh yeah, isn't this a lovely programme? I said, yeah, I actually made contact. Yeah, I'm trying to hear the programme. OK, so that obviously wasn't interesting either. I find it all highly interesting. I shall get on the radio later and tell some of the local nerds. They will be interested. I remember when I was about 12, 13, my next door neighbour was chatting with my dad and he said, I was listening on the radio last night and I heard a radio station from South Africa. And my dad was saying, oh yes, I often tune around on the shortwave radio. So back then people were interested, not so much as I am as a hobby, you know, amateur ham radio, but they were interested in tuning around and hearing stations from around the world, all around the world, Australia and everywhere. Because that was the way they got their news, wasn't it? It was only the radio and the telly, no computers or anything like that. Newspaper, radio and telly. So of course if they could tune into something from, I don't know, thousands of miles away. I remember listening to the propaganda from Albania, because Albania was, I don't know, it was the strange country, wasn't it? It's all right now, but they used to read out in English, they'd read out all this stuff about the West and how dreadful we are. And it was interesting. I know it was all propaganda, but it was interesting. No doubt we did the same, I don't know. There was the Voice of America. I think there was the Voice of Russia, wasn't there? Or the Voice of Moscow. All this propaganda being pumped out on the radio. It's all gone now, of course. They don't do that. They just hack into each other's computer systems. I don't know what happened in 2023. Trish has been looking back at our electricity, the bills and how much it cost. In 2023, the few months of the summer, I think up till September, we used a heck of a lot of kilowatt hours. I don't know quite what happened. And our electricity bill was horrendous. It was getting on for double other years. And we've been trying to think, what did we do? Did we buy a new appliance of any description that would use a lot of electricity? No, we didn't. We can't work out what it is. We're even wondering whether someone's tapping our electricity, getting into one of the sheds and running a cable into their house. But no, of course, that hasn't happened at all. So I don't know what's going on. Our electricity now, is it the most expensive in Europe, if not the world? Do you know, Tricia worked it out. Our gas, we've got gas heating and gas cooker. Oh, and of course the shower is from the gas boiler. It's over £30 a week. Can you believe that? Over £30 a week. We've got to have the heating on. I mean, today, look, it's sort of 0 degrees outside. We do need the heating, but prices have just gone through the roof. I really do wish we could go back to the old days where we had the coalmen deliver the coal, the black stuff, and we could stoke up the fire and just warm the house that way. I'm sure it didn't cost the equivalent to what it does now. It's just ridiculous. Apparently, allegedly, quite a few people are leaving the UK and they're moving to warmer countries because they're fed up with it. The prices of everything, the way the taxes are going up all over the place, they're moving out. Now, that wasn't heard of back in the 50s and 60s. People didn't move abroad permanently. Well, a few did, obviously for work, but not the way people are doing it now. They want the sunshine. They're fed up with this. You don't know how true that is, of course. This is what I've been reading online and hearing on the telly and the radio. It's probably a bunch of lies, propaganda, I don't know. I did know a chap that worked abroad in the 50s. He'd go sailing around the world for a few months and then come back. And he used to tell some interesting stories about where he'd been. I forget his name. About the things he'd seen and where he'd been in the sunshine. He often came back quite brown, suntanned. And this is in the winter. We've all got the coal fires going and he's come back from somewhere where it's really warm, probably summertime. Of course, he really felt the cold coming back to the UK in the middle of the winter, coming back from wherever, I don't know, southern hemisphere, and coming back here to the ice and snow and frost and doom and gloom. We're doomed. People just didn't go abroad back then. I remember when I was 15 in the radio and TV workshop, this chap said on a Monday morning, he said, I've been to Stockholm for the weekend. I thought, Stockholm? What's he on about? He hasn't been there, he's lying. But he had, apparently. I don't know why. I think he had a relative out there or something. He got on an aeroplane, got out to Stockholm, spent the weekend there, they'd flown back. And I remember thinking, I was sort of amazed that someone could do that, fly to Stockholm and back for the weekend. It was just so new, it just didn't happen. And yet this chap had done it. And I just remember thinking, wow, that's incredible. Whereas these days, I don't know about Australia. I'm just flying over to Australia for dinner. I'll be back in an hour. I wonder whether that will ever happen. Beam me up, Scotty. Beam me over to Sydney. I'm going to have lunch by the Opera House. I'll be back in about 2 hours. That would be interesting, wouldn't it? Trish once flew down to the south of France from Gatwick. She had to pick up one of the grandchildren. It's a long story. But she went down to the south of France. She had breakfast on the Mediterranean somewhere down there, picked up the grandchild and flew back. And I had to phone her work. I said she'll be a bit late in today. I think she did go in that day. And they said, oh, is she not well? I said, no, she's just having breakfast down on the Med. And her boss, she didn't believe me. She said, what? Breakfast down on the Mediterranean? What's wrong, really? And I said, honestly, that's what she's doing. She will tell you all about it when she gets back. I'm pretty sure she did go into work that afternoon. Because it's only, what is it, down there? I don't know, 2.5 hours? I don't know, perhaps it was the next day she went to work. You know what my memory's like? Dreadful. Talking of Tricia, she's in her gym at the moment, doing her treadmill thing, which is what I should be doing. I'm going to start walking, though, soon. Once this cold disappears completely, I shall start walking. That is not my New Year's resolution. I don't do all that rubbish, but I'm going to start walking. I used to walk 2 or 3 miles every morning without fail, come shine or rain, winter, summer, and I really felt good for doing that. I stopped in the end because my knee sort of packed up. I don't know what it did. It gave way and it ached. I could barely walk anywhere. But that seems to have healed itself over the years. I don't know why. I've also got to get back into losing some weight. Do you know, when I was a child, I was so skinny. People used to call me a human skeleton. I was that thin. I looked ill, actually. But I could eat anything, I could drink in my teens. I could go out for meals, I could eat fish and chips, drink loads of beer, didn't do anything. I was fine. I could get up the next morning, no headaches or anything, didn't put on weight. What a shame it's not like that now. I suppose that's old age, is it? So what is this new year going to bring us? 2025. What sort of things are going to happen this year, I wonder? Is this the start, the blue sky, the sunshine? Is this the beginning of some decent weather at long last? Perhaps we're going to have a decent summer. We won't talk politics because we know what that's going to bring, don't we? Politics, disaster. But weather-wise, I think we should be in for a good year. I've got a lot of jobs. I think I told you the other day, didn't I? I've got a list of jobs that I should have finished last summer. Creosote the fence, fix the leak in the shed roof, blah, blah, blah. I've still got the list here. It says jobs this year. So instead of 24, it's 25. I remember an old neighbour of ours, I would have been, 9 in 1960. New Year's Day, I saw him and he said, "Happy New Year, we've got a new decade, 1960s, what will that bring?" I remember that vividly because 1960, obviously the 60s, brought in a lot of stuff. Music and all sorts of nightclubs and everything was just brilliant, wasn't it? Pirate radio, the 60s. I can picture him now standing in the driveway saying to me, "What will the 1960s bring then? I wonder." I was just old enough, obviously, to experience the later 60s. Yes, I started work when I was 15, so 1966 that would have been. So obviously I was 16, 17, 18 in the 60s, the later 60s, and the lads in the workshop took me to nightclubs and pubs and all sorts of dreadful things went on. Happy days. Talking of dreadful things, did I ever tell you about this chap? He worked in a pub. He was just a barman in a pub, one of our local pubs that we went to regularly in our teens, us lads. One evening, a policeman walked in, plainclothes, CID, evening all, that sort of thing. Well, no, he didn't say evening all. And he went up to the landlord, who was behind the bar, and he said, "We'd like to inspect the vehicles outside, the cars." And the landlord said, oh yeah, what's going on? And he said, "There's someone that we're looking for and we think that they might have got into one of the vehicles outside." And then I thought it odd because he said to the barman who was next to the landlord, he said, "Could I have your car keys?" And I was thinking, well, surely no one could have got into this chap's car to hide from the police if it's locked. Anyway, he got the car keys and he went outside and he came back in about 10 minutes later. We're all thinking this is rather strange. But the landlord, though, who I knew quite well, he winked at me. And I'm thinking, what's going on here? This is all very strange. So the copper came back in with 2 bottles of whiskey and a load of cigarettes. And he put them all on the bar. And I'm just totally confused now, totally bewildered by the whole thing. And he said to the barman, "What's all this in your car?" And of course, the barman was then, I bought them. The landlord has suspected this barman of nicking cigarettes and booze. Now, he couldn't prove it, but he had a good idea of what was going on. So he didn't call the police. That chap wasn't a copper at all. It was one of the landlord's mates. He just walked into the pub. He looked like a copper. And he just flashed his wallet. He opened his wallet and showed something or other, like a warrant card, which it wasn't. People didn't take any notice of that, really. They just assumed that he was CID. And, of course, that was the way he got to search the car, the lad's car. And he'd been stealing, apparently, scotch, whiskey, gin, vodka, loads of cigarettes from the pub ever since he started work there about 6 months previously. Now, the lad thought it was a copper, you see. He thought, obviously, he's in big trouble. He's going to go to court and goodness knows what. So the landlord said, "Does this have to go through the police, or can I sort of get the stuff back from him that is stolen and he can pay me some sort of compensation?" So the imposter type policeman said, "Well, that's up to you. If you want to do it that way, you can." And the lad, he bought a load of stuff back from his flat, loads of cigarettes and booze. And, he thought that was a real copper and he was going to be in trouble. So he bought it all back. And the landlord worked out what was missing. Back then in the old days, obviously things were a lot cheaper. I think he had to give the landlord 70 or 80 quid, something like that. It was just under £100, something like that, which he had to pay him back. So it all worked out well in the end. But when this chap came in, CID, evening all, I thought it was genuine. He was really good. I don't know why he looked like a copper. I went into a pub once, again in my, mid-20s, I suppose. This chap, I just went up to the bar. I didn't know anyone in there. I went up to the bar and I heard this chap say, "He's the law." And I'm thinking, well, who's he talking about? He's not talking about me, surely. I had a suit on and a tie. I'd been somewhere, I can't remember. I was on my way home from somewhere and I popped in on my way home. And the landlord, when he came over to serve me, he said, "You're with the police?" And I said, "No." "What makes you think that?" And this other chap, he looked at me and he said, "You're a copper." I said, I'm not a copper at all. I don't know what it was. There was something about me, the way I looked, I don't know. They thought I was the police. I remember in the pubs in the old days, it was always pretty obvious when a copper walked in. I don't mean a uniformed policeman, plainclothes CID type copper. They were obvious. They stood out a mile. In fact, in one of our pubs, the head of our local CID, he used to drink in there at times. I mean, we knew him, obviously, but now he didn't look like a copper at all. He looked like a scruff bag. I can say that now because I'm going back decades. I remember another chap that I knew. He had an electrical shop and he was pretty sure that this girl that worked for him, she just manned the shop, or womaned the shop, I suppose, when he was out doing calls. And he was pretty sure that she wasn't putting all the money she took into the till. So he got a mate of his. He said, "Look, go into the shop when you see me leave, right? Go in there and buy a motor. There's 17 quid or whatever, this particular motor." So this chap went in, he said, "Have you got a so-and-so motor?" "Yes," she said, "there we are, that's it, 17 quid. He gave her the exact money and off he went. So then my mate that owned the shop, he went back in and he said, "Had a good morning, how you doing? Are you taking much?" She said, "Oh, just one or two bits and pieces." And he said, "Oh, where's the motor gone that was on the shelf?" So of course she said, "Oh, I sold that." And he's looking on the till. "Oh, where's the money then?" Anyway, she got caught out. She'd got the money in her purse. And apparently she was doing that on a regular basis. Every now and then something she sold, if she got the right money, if it was a fiver, she'd pocket it. So he sacked her and apparently her dad turned up. He told her to go home. He said, "That's it, go home, give me my 17 quid back." Anyway, she went home. And about an hour later, her dad turned up. "Why have you sacked her?" And she was with her dad. She was only in her late teens. He had to say, "Look, I'm sorry, but she's been stealing from me." "She wouldn't steal. My daughter doesn't steal." And of course the girl looked at her dad and said, "He's right, Dad, I've been stealing money." So that was all a bit of a disaster for their family. I just heard on the radio, I was making a cup of coffee, it's going to be a good summer. That's what I said earlier. Wouldn't that be nice if it were true, a good summer? Of course, you know what I'm going to be banging on about now, don't you, now that we're in January? Every midweek message, every Sunday episode. The bulbs are coming up, the daffodils are coming up. In fact, the daffodils are coming up already. The buds are on the fig tree, the buds are on the camellia, the cherry tree's got leaves. You won't hear the end of it. Well, why not? The winter's such a long time, isn't it? Apparently we've got some very, very cold weather coming up this weekend. You'll be listening to this Sunday. Snow and cold for this weekend. But again, how true is that? It's now Friday. They're talking about Sunday. They don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, let alone Sunday. Oh, I nearly forgot. Talking of stealing things, a friend of mine, he bought a flat, moved in, nice flat, and it had a garage. Now, the garage was nowhere near his flat. It was a converted house, and then somewhere in the garden there was a driveway to this garage, and he owned the garage as well. It went with the flat. And he'd been there something like 10 years when he had an electrician come round to do some work. And the electrician said, "That garage out there, do you pay for the electricity?" He said, "Well, yes, it's wired into my flat, obviously, goes with the flat." And the chap said, "No, it doesn't. It goes into someone else's flat. The cable from the garage doesn't go into your flat at all." So, of course, this chap said, "I could owe whoever it is thousands of pounds worth of electricity over 10 years. Someone else has been paying the bill." Anyway, the electrician rewired the garage to his flat, so it was all put as it should be. And he was going to tell this chap. He thought, "I'm going to have to tell him," because he was honest. He thought, "I've got to tell him. I've got to give him something for 10 years of electricity." Not that he used a lot out there. He thought perhaps he'd give him a couple of £100 or something. Anyway, the chap moved out, the one that had been paying for all the electricity. He sold the flat and moved out. So that was that. He wasn't never able to pay him. He didn't know where he'd moved to. He didn't know him. They weren't friends or anything. They were just neighbours. All they did was say hello. He said to me he was shocked when the electrician said, "You haven't been paying for your electricity at all. Someone else has." He couldn't believe it. There was a chap on the news many years ago. The gas people kept sending him bills for gas. And he didn't have gas at his place. And he kept telling them, "Look, I don't have gas." And anyway, they took him to court, and it was a ridiculous story. What it was, they were billing him for some property next door. I don't know what it was, some industrial thing next door. There'd been some mix-up with the gas supply. And this went on for months and months. In the end, they took him to court. And of course, then it was all worked out what had gone wrong. But what a dreadful thing to have to endure. The chap said he wrote letters, phone calls. He'd been to see the gas people. They wouldn't listen to him. No, you owe the money. And he hadn't even got gas in his property. It's amazing, isn't it? I also remember a friend of mine, the electricity people, accused him of removing the electricity meter. And he said, "Well, what would I do that for?" Apparently there were 2 meters, and they accused him of removing one. And he said, "I wouldn't know how to remove the meter. I'd probably blow myself up or something." "Oh, no," they said, "oh, no, don't believe that. Where's our meter? We want our meter back. You've removed one." And this went on for months and months. They kept calling at the house. And in the end, it was some sort of paperwork error on the electricity people's part, And they apologised. And he said, "Well, it's not good enough. I want more than an apology." And he got £100, I think, knocked off the bill or whatever they did as compensation. Better than nothing, I suppose. But what can you do? You don't have a leg to stand on. He hadn't taken a meter out. Why would he? As he said, he wouldn't know how to. He wasn't an electrician or anything. He wouldn't know what to do. And also, why would he? He'd got his own meter there. He was paying the electricity anyway. That was all sorted out eventually. Do you have any strange tales of being charged for electricity when it's not yours, or gas or anything? Let me know. Raise rants at protonmail.com. Raise rants, all one word, at protonmail.com. And the website, of course, if you want to have a look, raiserants.info. Raiserants.info. It's now Saturday, very cold again, -4 earlier on this morning, about 5:30, 6 o'clock, -4 out there. I was watching telly last night and I was reminded of something that happened to me decades ago. It must have been the 70s, late 70s, I think. I'd been to Stockport. Is that Cheshire? Stockport? Somewhere up there. Driving back, I stopped at a pub for something to eat. It was a village-type pub, very nice little pub. And they were very friendly in there. They welcomed me, just a few people at the bar. I ordered my food, got myself a drink, and sat down. Coke, by the way, because I was driving. So I had my glass of Coke, I sat down, and I saw this picture on the wall opposite me, which was crooked. And I was looking at it, and I thought, that's no good. I went over and straightened it, and I stood back, and it slipped crooked again. So I went back to the picture. It was one hook in the wall and a kind of wire from each end of the top of the frame. So I moved it slightly across to balance it. Got it just right, stood back, and it slipped again. The left-hand side went down. I couldn't understand what was going on. Anyway, one of the chaps at the bar, he said, "You won't straighten that picture." And I went over to the bar and I said, "Yeah, why not? What's wrong with it?" "It's haunted," he said. "Haunted? Haunted? I mean, come on, a picture." It was a painting of a chap fishing in a lake. He was just sitting by the lake and he was fishing. And these chaps at the bar explained to me that it was over 100 years ago. This chap was fishing, and the land, he wanted this bit of the bank of the lake flattened out because it was at an angle. Anyway, it was muddy. He slipped, went in, and wasn't seen again, obviously drowned. And they reckoned that the ghost of this chap would upset the balance of the picture. And I thought, well, this is rubbish. I didn't say that, but I thought, this is nonsense. Of course it's not a haunted picture. Anyway, I had my food, finished my glass of Coke. I was about to go, and I straightened it again. The minute I stepped back to look at it, it went to one side again. So I don't know. Now, how do you explain that? I wonder whether the wall was crooked, because I saw a news item once, local TV news. There was this road, they were showing the road, and this stream next to the road, sort of in the gutter really, it wasn't really a stream, the water was flowing uphill. Well, it doesn't do that, does it? Water doesn't flow uphill. And they said what it was, the surrounding hills and the surrounding sort of view, it was an optical illusion. It looked as though the road was going up. In fact, it was going downhill. So when you looked at it at this certain angle, it appeared that the water was going uphill. And that's what I wondered about that wall. Was it the wall itself? I checked with the people and they said, no, the wall's not crooked. They said, we've done all that. We've used spirit levels and everything. The wall's perfect, all right. The picture's perfectly balanced. It's just that every time anyone straightens it, and they said many people come in here and straighten it, within a few seconds, it slips back again. How strange is that? I've heard similar stories to that over the decades, how strange things happen. My mother once said to me that they went to a little pub, her and my dad, went to a little pub somewhere in the sticks at the back of the downs here. And this lovely little pub, they had lunch there. It was a really nice place. And they wanted to go back. Some weeks later, they thought, let's go up to that pub and have lunch. They couldn't find it. They found the area where it was, and one or two landmarks, which they recognised, but the pub had gone. The thing is, there was no sign of it, no demolition signs or anything. It's as if it had never been there. And they asked around in the local village and they said, oh no, that pub went years ago. So that's strange, isn't it? Is there an explanation to that? Had they got the wrong area? They just got it totally wrong? That's the trouble, you don't know. It's like that painting. Was there something about the painting? I don't know what there could have been, but out of balance. But even so, if you balance it properly, I don't know. Strange. Has anything strange happened to you like that? Raise rants at protonmail.com. Totally different subject now. I was listening to the radio the other day and they played Purple Rain by Prince. Now you might not like that. You might like that. I love it, Purple Rain. I like the guitar. You get the song all the way through, then the guitar comes in at the end, and I just think it's fantastic. I do like electric guitars. I'm listening on the radio and I was saying to Trish, any second now, here comes the guitar. As it was about to start, the DJ came on and said, right, let's go over to some sports news next. And I'm thinking, well, what about the record? What about, idiot, absolute idiot. Talked over the best part of the record. And do you know DJs do that these days? They didn't do it back in the days of the pirate ships. They played the record, the whole record properly. How about Bob Harris, whispering Bob Harris? Can you imagine him talking rubbish over a record introduction or halfway through or the end of it? Of course not. In the old days, DJs were passionate about the music. They loved the music. They wanted to hear the music and play it to us. Let us hear it and appreciate it. These days, DJs are more, look at me, I'm famous. I want to be known by everyone. Look, I'm a DJ, aren't I good? It's all this personal stuff now with DJs. They're not passionate about the music as they used to be. They're more interested in themselves and becoming personalities and household names. It's such a shame. I don't know why they do that. I know I'm always banging on about the radio stations in the old days. And this is one of the many, many reasons why. You get a good record and they go and talk over either the introduction, which some of the intros are really good, aren't they, on some tracks, or perhaps towards the end, you're getting that last bit of the record, and they start rabbiting, talking, what's that word again, beginning with, oh yes, rubbish, isn't it? Talking of the radio, I heard this morning that 37 shops are closing in the UK every week. 37 every week are closing because it's just not viable anymore to run the shop. What with the rent, the business rates, the electricity, the insurance, the staff, if you've got any, all the bills, the heating, the lights, the whole lot. It's just not a viable proposition anymore. You're open all week to do what? Just to pay the rent. Then you can't pay the rest of the bills, let alone any money for yourself. 37 every week are closing. Another reason they cited, there's a word, was shoplifting. Gangs of people just walking into shops, stripping the shelves of whatever, it might be clothing, might be food, alcohol, whatever is in the shop, and walking out with it, filling trolleys up and just walking out with the trolley without paying. And there's nothing the staff can do. They were saying some of the shop owners, they can't stop shoplifting. What can you do? And they've just closed the shop. It's the easiest way out of it. Just shut the shop and forget the whole thing. What a shame, isn't it? We were a nation of shopkeepers, and 37 every single week are closing down. They're still talking on the TV news programmes and all that about reviving the high street. I don't see how you can revive it. Surely it's finished. It's something, unfortunately, like a lot of things from the past, that won't come back again. Talking of shops, I was watching a programme on telly the other evening about sweets, confectionery, sweet shops, all from the 1950s, 1960s. Who remembers sherbet fountains? They were good, weren't they? Blackjacks, 4 for a penny. All the different sweets that we can no longer get. Well, they said we can no longer get them because they finished production, but some of them, like Mars bars, for example, they are still manufactured, aren't they? But it was amazing seeing old film of kids going into a sweet shop. I'll have a quarter of aniseed balls, please, and a quarter of pear drops. And the lady would pour them out into the scales, then put them into a paper bag. Fantastic. A lot of the sweets I'd forgotten about. Do you remember the Yorkie bar? Made for men, wasn't it? Not made for girls. I mean, you can't put that these days. People will be offended. They get upset, start crying, having nervous breakdowns. Not made for girls. God. Dear me, I don't know what the world's come to. Anyway, it was an interesting programme. That was part 1. We've got part 2 to come at some stage. And some of the shops, there was an old lady, well, I say old, sort of my age. So there was an old lady. She said a lot of the shops were people's front rooms that had been converted into shops. And I thought that's exactly what I've been banging on about, wasn't it, a few weeks back, how people would convert their lounge into a shop. Take the lounge window out, put a shop front in, have a door, stick open on it, get yourself a till and start taking some money. So that was an interesting programme. We both watched that. It was very interesting. I've just played back a bit of the recording. I do sound rough, don't I? Trying to get rid of this blasted cough. The cold's just about gone. It's left me with a cough. Another thing they were talking about on this programme were the adverts back then. And they showed people with drawing boards, working on different adverts for sweets mainly. And they were saying that a lot of the sweets were made for a specific gender, like these are made for girls, these are made for boys. The girl sweets had a lot of pink in them because that's how we were back then. Boys were blue, girls were pink. These days it's kind of yellow, green, black. I don't know what it is these days. And they were saying that how the manufacturers would make things like love hearts. Who remembers love hearts? They were made for girls, apparently. And was it the shrimps, the pink shrimps? They were made for girls. Gobstoppers, they were made for boys. It sounds like a boys thing, doesn't it? A gobstopper. Do you remember the gobstoppers? The ones they were showing, the modern ones, apparently you can still get them. Tiny things, size of a marble. Rubbish. The chap was saying in my day they were huge. They were probably dangerous, actually. If you think about it, you get that stuck in your throat. Anyway, the gobstoppers, I remember, the big ones, they took hours to sort of melt, dissolve or whatever, and you finally would come down to the centre, which was an aniseed ball. I love that. Do you remember aniseed balls? They were nice. I used to buy a bag full of those. And of course they were cheap. Blackjacks, 4 for a penny, all sorts of stuff. But the advertising angle was interesting. And the amount of sugar, sherbet, for example, apparently sherbet, I forget what it is, it's some sugary stuff with a tang to it. That was invented, if that's the right word, in 1800 and something. But the amount of sugar in these sweets that the kids were having, well, and me back then, it was just sugar. The candy type cigarettes, the pretend cigarettes, they were just sugar. All of these sweets were just sugar. It's amazing how any of us that were brought up in those days have got any teeth left. Well, I haven't got many left, but perhaps it's all the sweets I had. And Milky Way, they had punchlines. Mars bar was helps you work, rest and play. The Milky Way was the snack you can have that won't ruin your meal. Well, of course it ruined your meal. As they said on there, it's chocolate. You can't have a chocolate sweet thing and it doesn't ruin your appetite for your meal. Anyway, they had these punchlines and things. Some were for girls, some were for boys. Great days. I used to love the old adverts. As someone said on there, the adverts back then were creative. These days, you don't know what they're advertising. It goes on for about 3 hours. And at the end of the advert, you're not quite sure what it is they're advertising. A load of rubbish. And of course, the toys back then in the 50s and 60s, they were very much, what's the term? Is it gender specific or something? Boys and girls, basically, which is what we were. The girls had their dolls and their dolls' prams that they pushed them around in. The boys had roller skates, footballs, stuff like that. Is that right? Do you think that's right? Or do you think that's bad? Or I don't know what you think. Raise rants at protonmail.com. Mother-in-law's just turned up. It's Saturday lunch, of course. We've got mother-in-law, we've got sister-in-law, brother-in-law, daughter number 1, and goodness knows how many more for lunch. So I shall plod on with the podcast until they all arrive. Then I'll have to go down and show my face, I suppose. The doorbell just went, so I looked out of the window here. I think it was the postman. But racing up the road was a model car. I can't see anyone. Can't see anyone in the road. Someone's obviously controlling it. This model car went racing by. Must have been doing 30 miles an hour, if not more. Woof, it went up the road. Woof, just like that. I'll have to get a transmitter out and jam it. Or would I do that? Goodness me, would I do that? Certainly not. In the old days of model aircraft, boats and cars, they were all very, very close to the CB band, or actually in the CB band, which wasn't a CB band then, of course. But the lads of that used to get hold of AM CB radios, and they chat on those in their cars, all illegal, of course. And it jammed the aircraft, the remote control people. And I remember being up the Downs. I wasn't jamming them, I was doing something else. And I remember seeing this aeroplane coming down, straight, crash into the ground. And there was a chap in his car with a CB aerial on top, and I was sure it was him. He deliberately jammed the signal to this remote control aircraft. That's silly, isn't it, to ruin someone's model like that, spoil their hobby. But there we are. That's what people did back then. Well, and now, of course, these days. Email from Neville. Hello, Neville. He says, do you use Cockney rhyming slang? Neville's in New Zealand, by the way. Do you use Cockney rhyming slang in the UK? I think they probably still do in London, Neville. We don't down here. He's sent a few samples here. I don't know most of these, to be honest. Iron tank, which is a bank. Dicky bird, word. I suppose instead of saying to someone, could I have a word? You would say, could I have a dicky bird? A word in your ear, was it? Loop the loop, which is soup. Jam jar is car. There must be hundreds, if not thousands of all these. China plate, mate. I know that one. I've heard China plate, mate. What else have we got here? Oh, tea leaf is a thief. I know that one. Here's an old one. Ginger beer, queer. I think I'll have a pint of queer. That doesn't sound right, does it? Anyway, that's what it was. Ginger beer, queer. Jack Jones, alone. Mince pies, eyes. Rosie Lee, tea. I know that one. Rosie Lee, cup of tea. Quite amazing if you could remember this lot. You wouldn't understand, would you? A couple of Cockney lads chatting to each other using mainly rhyming slang. You wouldn't know what they're talking about, would you? Should we go down to the Rubber Dub Dub? That's the pub. Let's go to the Rubber Dub Dub. Uncle Fred, bread, oily rag, fag. Give us an oily rag, mate. But you wouldn't understand a thing they were saying, would you? Trouble and strife, wife. Goose's neck, check. Why is that a goose's neck for a check? Gay and frisky, whiskey. Oh, I fancy a gay and frisky. What? Anyway, yes, this is obviously very old. Cat and mouse house, boat race face. I know that one. Bees and honey, money. Have you got any bees and honey? Yeah, how much do you want? Anyway, there's a whole list here. Thanks, Neville, for that. Apples and pears, stairs. Back in the 60s, I do remember people using one or two rhyming slang examples, but nothing like they do up the East End. I have been to the East End. I've been into East End pubs going back many years, and I did hear quite a lot of this, obviously. Down the East End and all that, innit? It's good. It's nice. I like the East End, not the programme, not the TV programme. I liked the Cockneys, the East Enders. I went up there several times to the East End in the local pubs. Very friendly people, I found anyway, very friendly, welcoming. I remember the first time I went, I thought, are they going to want some kind of southerner, some southern boy, in their pub? But they were great. They really were welcoming. I wonder what it's like now. Well, I suppose the East End, is it still there? All the Cockneys, are they still there? I don't know. It's probably all gone. A few years back, probably 5, 6, 7 years back, a chap stopped me and asked me directions. I was walking round to the local shops here. Sorry, I've been coughing like mad here. He stopped me and asked me directions to somewhere, and he was from the East End. And he said, do you live down here? I said, yes, always have done. And he said, oh, I'm from the East End. He said, I'd love to move down here, but the house prices are just too much. He said, I wouldn't even get a flat, a one-bedroom flat. He owned a house somewhere in the East End, and he said, most of my neighbours have moved out. And he said, the value of my house now is just next to nothing. And I'm desperate to leave. He said, I want to get out of the East End because it's all changed. He reckoned he was going to have to end up renting somewhere. He wanted to move down here to the coast. But he's right, the house prices down here, the southeast of England, I don't know why, hugely expensive. Even the rents, he said he couldn't really afford to rent anywhere. But I thought that was a shame because I said to him I used to go up to the East End in the old days and it was lovely. And he just said, yeah, sadly, not anymore. So that was that. I wonder what happened to him. Wonder whether he's still there or whether he did move out in the end. Don't know. A friend of mine a few years back, he moved up to Norfolk and he bought a 4 or 5 bedroom house. I think it was a 5 bedroom house in Norfolk with a lot of land, double garage, all this sort of thing. Really nice. He sold his house here and there's only him and his wife. And I said, why have you bought this huge place if it's just the two of you? And he said, if ever we want to move back down here, to be able to afford to buy a house, I'm going to have a house of the equivalent value, if you see what I mean. So buying a 5 bedroom house with land, if he sold that, he could then afford to buy, I suppose, an ordinary sort of 3 bedroom house here. What a difference, though, in prices. A 5 bedroom house down here with some land would, I don't know what it would be, $1 million? It must be a big house like that with some land. Whereas up there, it was the same price as the house he sold here, which was, I don't know what, 250,000 or something, 300,000, I've no idea. Going back a few years. I know people in the past have moved either Norfolk way or further up north, North England, because of the cheaper house prices. I remember another chap many years ago, he said, I need a big house, I want a big garden. He was well into gardening, and he moved somewhere up north, and he got a massive place. I remember he sent me photos of it. That's in the days when you had to take a photo with a camera, get it developed at the chemist, and then post it, and it turned up in the post. These days you can do a live video. Look, here's my new house. A live video, of course. But back then things were very different. And I remember seeing these photos. I remember thinking, wow, this is amazing. He's got it's like a ranch with a load of land. Fantastic. Brilliant if you're a radio ham. Put aerials up and all sorts of things. That's what you need, some land, isn't it, to put aerials up. We've only got a very small garden here, which, to be honest, as I get older, is enough because it's a lot of work. A large garden. I did have a large garden many years ago, a huge long garden, and the upkeep, I never did finish it. The far end was just a wilderness area. Past this hedge we had, past that it was just wilderness, long grass, and I always wanted to get round to making it nice, but so much work. It needed completely landscaping. But that was good for aerials. I had a big aerial up there. Talking of aerials, I'm waiting to get out into the garden and do some work on my aerials to sort out the cables and 1 or 2 bits that haven't survived the various storms we've had recently. The squirrel this morning, little devil, one of the squirrels I should say, he leapt up onto this shelf we got under the patio, and there was a tortoise. It's, what are they made of, these sort of resin stuff these days, aren't they? They're not China or whatever. This resin type tortoise, a lovely model tortoise. What did he do? Sent it flying and it smashed to bits on the patio floor, on the paving. They're little devils, those squirrels. They dig holes all over the lawn. This is why we stopped feeding them years ago. But then we put out a few nuts for this one that looked all cow-eyed and sad and starved. And of course now his friends, or one of his friends at least, has got wind of this, so he joins in. The pair of jays we've got, they obviously saw this and thought, hello, there's some food there, we'll join in. There's a pigeon. Of course, once the pigeon tells his mates, that'll be the end of it. It'll all be too much. We've just bought a huge sack, massive sack of peanuts. Was it 30, 40 pounds? I can't remember. In money, not weight, in money. It's a lot of money. I do like to see the squirrels. I just wish they wouldn't dig up plants and dig holes everywhere. I've set my trail cam up, for Christmas. I got a trail cam from Tricia. I've set that up down the garden for the first time properly. So I'm going to see what we catch on that tonight. I've set it up looking along the garden path down to the end. They'll probably go and knock the camera over. I've tried to secure it a bit on the ground, but they'll probably go and knock it over. I think we've got a cat that comes into the garden and possibly at least one fox. I'm not sure. A couple of times now I've looked out at night and I think it's a fox. It could be a cat. Pitch dark out there, very difficult to tell. If it is a fox, I will record him. I'll get the video of him. So that'll be interesting. I would like foxes to come into the garden. Having said that, all my aerial cables everywhere, they'll probably chew through the whole lot, won't they? I think my voice, my throat needs a bit of a break. So I'm going to see if I can get some lunch, an early lunch and perhaps a drink of water. And I shall come back and finish off the last quarter of an hour after lunch. See you in a minute. That's better. A couple of bread rolls with cheese and pickle in, and a cup of tea. Oh, and a piece of fruit cake. So much for my diet. I'm not meant to be having cake. Talking of lunch, there was a chap back in the 60s in the TV workshop. He was in his 60s, back in the 60s, so he'll not be with us now. He used to bring in his lunchbox every day at 1 o'clock when it was lunchtime. He'd sit at his bench. The lunchbox was a tin thing, cream, with a green lid. Do you remember those back then? 50s, 60s? A tin box, green lid, cream sort of body of the box. He had his white bread sandwiches in there, and he had his thermos flask full of tea that matched the lunchbox, cream and green again. He'd pour out his tea and eat his sandwiches. I think he had an apple in there or banana or something. And he was a nice old boy. He was coming up to 65, retirement in those days. Now it's about 105, isn't it, retirement age? And I was chatting to him one lunch hour about his car. I said, how come your car is a sort of matte finish? And he said, I don't know. It was an Austin A35. It was green, a very light green, almost like a pastel green, completely matte. He said, I don't know why. He said, I wash it every Sunday, keep it clean. And I said, well, do you polish it? And he said, well, no, I don't. He said, I have polished it once or twice, and it's come up a really shiny finish. He said, but the next weekend when I wash it, it goes back to matte. And I was thinking, well, that's odd. Why would that happen? So I said, what polish do you use? And he used, I forget what it was back then, turtle wax was it or something? Something back in the 60s that was pretty good. And I said, well, it's odd that the polish washes off. What do you use to wash it with? Washing powder, he said. Washing powder, the stuff you put in the washing machine. Daz, do you remember Daz and Omo? All those sort of washing powders. They stripped the polish off, of course. Is it enzymes they've got in them? I don't know what they've got in them. Washing powder back in those days would strip anything. He said, I didn't understand it. The following weekend I'd give it a wash and it's gone back to matte finish. And I told him, I said, your washing powder is taking off the polish. Oh, really? He wasn't daft. Well, perhaps he was. But it was rather odd that he didn't realise that. Anyway, a couple of weeks later I saw his car parked outside the workshop, all looking shiny and new. And I went and found him. I said, hey, Bill, your car looks nice. Beautiful polish on it. He said, yes, and I've washed it, and it doesn't come off. I use proper car wash. I said, there you are then, Bill. I was right. He was ever so pleased. And of course, after that, he polished it as well as washed it every weekend. He'd give it a wash, then a polish, and it really did come up like a new car. I'm surprised it didn't ruin the paintwork, actually, but he really was pleased with that. Talking of manufacturing in Britain back in the old days, which we weren't, of course, but we are now, I had socks for Christmas, amongst other things, 6 pairs of socks. Everyone gets socks for Christmas, don't they? You have to. It's sort of compulsory. You've got to have socks. And I looked at them. I thought, this is nice. So many percent cotton, so many percent nylon, which I don't like nylon at all. But they're quite nice. Made in Turkey on the packet. I thought, hang on, made in Turkey. Can't we make socks? Made in Turkey. Honestly, they've got to manufacture them over there. They've got to ship them here. People are always on about the environment and ships pumping out diesel, aeroplanes pumping out whatever they pump out. And we have to buy socks that are made in Turkey. What is the point? As I've said before many times, you go to your local supermarket, look at a packet of runner beans, in a plastic packet of course, which is daft. Egypt, it'll say on it, or Spain. Runner beans? We could grow those here. Stone the crows, what is wrong with us here? You buy a pair of socks, they're made in Turkey. They should be made up, where was it, the cotton mills and all that up Lancashire way. All the manufacturing we did up there. It's all gone. I just don't understand the logic of buying stuff abroad that we can either grow or make here in Britain. What is the point in that? There again, I suppose I don't understand the logic of anything these days. It all seems to be balmy. My hometown and surrounding areas, well, the whole of Sussex really, whole of the county, it was full of greenhouses. 100 years ago, full of greenhouses. Tomatoes, cucumbers, we grew the lot. And they were shipped by train all round the country. We were known for tomatoes down here. We were called Sunny Worthing. Sunny Worthing, that's what we were called, because the sun was always shining and we grew tomatoes by the million. That's all stopped. You buy tomatoes now. Where are they from? Again, Spain, Portugal, Egypt, where I don't know where they're from, all over the place. It just seems daft. There was a documentary a while ago on telly about tomatoes still being grown here in Worthing. Some huge greenhouses, but I'm not sure where that is. Possibly that's an old documentary, I don't know, I can't remember. But it's the same with also anything you buy, electronic. China written all over it, whatever you buy. Had a nice pair of shoes a couple of years ago, was it? Inside the shoes, made in India. I don't know what we make anymore here in Britain. I don't think we make anything. We used to be the sort of manufacturing centre of the world at one stage. We shipped stuff abroad all over the place. We had engineering works up north of England, engineering works, backstreet engineering works, churning out bearings, metal products. All this stuff was going on. There's nothing left now. It's such a shame. And now, of course, they're saying something about we've got to import electricity and gas from abroad, from France under the Channel pipeline and stuff, because we're not going to use our own anymore. We've got the North Sea oil and gas, and apparently that's going to be done away with. No more new licenses for drilling. So we'll have to import the stuff. Well, surely that costs more, doesn't it, than making our own? I don't know. I don't understand it all. I've just had a delivery, a little printed circuit board for a project that I'm working on, electronics project. And it says on it, China. Little printed circuit board. There we are, China. Everything I buy, whether I buy it from here or wherever, made in China. It used to be Japan, didn't it? Back in the 70s, 80s, hi-fi equipment, cameras. I think cameras are still made in Japan, aren't they? There's Sony, isn't there? That's Japanese, I believe. It was always Japanese. I remember people saying years ago, if it's made in Japan, it's got to be good. Make sure it says Japan on it. Of course, in my day, in the 50s, a lot of stuff, kids' toys and things, had Empire Made written on them. I remember that, Empire Made. I do remember asking my grandmother, what is Empire Made? Where's Empire? Where is it? I thought it was a country. Let's get the atlas out and find Empire. She explained it to me, of course, and I didn't understand. I didn't know what she was talking about. Other toys had Hong Kong on them. Everything was Hong Kong. Whatever you buy, Hong Kong. All rather strange. And then radio equipment, when CB radios came in, you take the radio apart and the printed circuit board would say things like Taiwan, Hong Kong, Taiwan. Never England, never Great Britain. Strange, isn't it? We can't make a damn thing here. Anyway, let's not moan anymore about that. Nothing I can do about it. I've got my little board here, and I have to say, the printed circuit boards, anything I've ever bought from China, or from here, from China, if you see what I mean, it's terrific value, and that, I'm looking at it now, that is really nicely made. It's an HF bias T, if anyone's interested, and I'm sure you're not. In fact, I'm now making, if anyone does know what I'm talking about, I know there are a few radio hams that listen to this. It's for my mini whip active antenna, and I've just made my own bias T. I don't know why I ordered this one. I've made my own, and it is far better than the 3 or 4 Chinese ones I've got here. So that's good news, isn't it? Yes, you're saying. Can we move on? Oh, sorry, let's move on. We're going to miss all the snow apparently down here on the south coast of Britain. We're going to miss the snow. That's all up to north. Fairly mild here apparently over the weekend. What day it is now? I told you, didn't I? Oh, it's Saturday now, isn't it? Yes, so Sunday, tomorrow, we're having rain, while apparently, allegedly, the rest of the country will have snow. I don't mind the cold. In fact, I prefer cold to rain and snow and wind. It's nice if you get a really cold, frosty day, just right for going out for a walk. Oh, did I tell you I went for a walk yesterday? My first one of this year, and I'm going to have a walk every day. Trish is coming with me. Ease back into it again so I can do 2, maybe 3 miles every day like I used to, going back a couple of years. That was good. I enjoyed that walking. I must get back into that and try to keep healthy. Of course, the older you get, the more important it is to keep healthy. When I was a boy, in my teens, I didn't keep healthy at all. I'd eat all the wrong food, I'd drink too much, I smoked, but I somehow survived. I don't know how I survived all that. Talk about a misspent youth. Stone the crows, it was good fun though. I've just had a look at the website, rants.info, and there's a Christmas tree there. I suppose I should take that off. And what I will put there is some bulbs coming up and the buds and the leaves coming for the springtime. So keep an eye on the website. Don't forget, if you want to email me, raiserants@protonmail.com. It's always nice to hear from people wherever you are in the world. What was that? That was a news flash. Let's have a look at that. Oh, something about William and Kate. I'll have a look at that in a minute. So what's happening where you are? What's the weather doing? I'm not going to ask Rob down in Australia because he'll say it's 37 or 40 degrees or something daft. and he'll tell me that he's sitting on the beach enjoying the view. Whatever the view might be, young ladies in bikinis, I expect. Christmas dinner on the beach. Anyway, hello Rob, if you're listening. I know you're listening, you're always listening, aren't you? Hope you're enjoying your summer. We're not enjoying our winter. Happy days. We're coming up to the hour, so I shall finish off in a few minutes, and I'm going to tidy my radio room here. It's a bit of a mess. When I'm working on a project, I seem to make a mess everywhere, then I have to clear it all up. So that will keep me busy for the afternoon. You'll be listening to this Sunday morning, of course. Some of you will have snow somewhere up north in England and Scotland. Wales, I think you're having snow. Ireland, of course. And we're just having rain and mild weather. We've got the fire going. We've had the people around for lunch, so we've got the coal fire going. Trish lit that earlier, which is nice. And she's now just informed me that she's taking down the Christmas decorations. Only seems 2 days ago we were putting everything up. Christmas cards arriving and the tree going up, the lights and everything. And now it's all got to come down again. I don't know. Have we done the 12 days? It's the 5th tomorrow, I believe, isn't it? Is that 12 days of Christmas? I don't know. I'm not sure. It's long enough anyway. Some people, of course, have had their decorations up since November. Now that's November, December, then into January. That's too long. I like the 12 days if we can do that. So I shall go down and help Trish. Well, what I shall do, you see, my ploy is I shall go down and say, shall I help? And I'll start moving things around, and she will say, oh, no, leave that. No, I'm putting so-and-so in that box. Leave that. Why don't you go upstairs and play radio? Oh, all right then. Well, I was going to help. No, just go upstairs out of the way. It's a good plan, isn't it? Go downstairs, make out I'm trying to help, just become a nuisance and get sent back up here again. Lovely jubbly. Actually, Tricia knows me of old. She knows my plan. She knows what I'm up to when I start to help and get in the way. Same in the kitchen. Can I help? No. Go upstairs, go and play radio, go in the garden, go in the shed, go anywhere but the kitchen. It's rather good. It works out well, actually. Okay, that's about it. Be good, be bad. If you're going to be bad, don't get caught. Are any of you ever bad? I've asked you this before. Every time I speak to you, I say be bad, don't get caught. No one's ever emailed me and said, yes, I've been bad. So if you've been bad, let me know. Raise rants at protonmail.com. I don't mean bad illegal. You know, if you've done anything illegal, I don't want to know, but just bad. I remember at primary school, we had a teacher. He used to walk into the classroom and say, right, who's been bad? Because there was noise, you know, we were left on our own for 5 minutes. Who's been bad? And we'd all sit there silent. And he'd say, okay, Johnson, Smith, Jones, back of the class, stand in the corner. He knew who it was. It was always the same three. They had to go and stand in the corner of the classroom, only for 10 minutes or so, and then they were allowed to sit down again. But it was always the same three. I don't know what they'd done. In fact, I don't think it was always them. It was other people as well, shouting and mucking about. Of course, it was never me, little Mr. Innocent, sitting at the back of the class reading a comic, the Beano, or the Dandy, Dennis the Menace with his dog Nasher. I was never bad. I was quietly reading at the back of the class. I shall see you on Wednesday. Be good, be bad, get caught, don't get caught, and all that nonsense. Thanks for listening. I've enjoyed your company immensely, as always. Take care. Bye-bye for now.